Correct. She's graduating this fall. This fall, yes.
May.
And this May. Sorry about that.
You're
And
good.
then she is the founder of the Rising Phoenix program. Without further ado, Alannah Scardino.
Well, hi everyone. I'm so excited to be here, and thanks for that introduction, Julian. It was so awesome. I got to chat with the e-board earlier this week, just kind of set up an agenda, what we would be doing. But I'm so grateful to kind of have the opportunity to meet everybody and kind of explain kind of what I've been doing. If anybody has questions, I'm just have like a little presentation I'll pull up, then I'll just shut it off because I don't really like presentations anyway. But if you have questions throughout it, just like chat. I'm literally just a college student, just like you guys. So we're just people chatting. I'm gonna share my screen and just start this quick presentation. But welcome. So you guys all can see this. I'll just assume yes, unless somebody tells me no. So this is the Rising Phoenix program. So that's my logo. Rising Phoenix is an organization that we are aiming to use sports to support survivors in the juvenile justice system. It's a specifically girl-centered program trying to help those girls. But before we kind of get into the program, just an introduction to me. So my name is Alannah, and kind of Julian already covered the basics. I go to UMass Amherst. I'm graduating in May, which time has flown, absolutely. I'm a double major in sport management and this major called social thought and political economy. So I'm kind of at that intersection of the sport business world and the very social thought. The focus of study is kind of like the why some people have opportunities and some people don't. So trying to kind of bring those two interesting pieces together and find that intersection and use both to hopefully make a positive impact. I'm originally from Rochester, New York, even though I live out in kind of the middle of Massachusetts now. And then just some background on my sport background. I played soccer most of my life. I played football my senior year of high school. I'm also on the UMass polo team. That's one of our horses, Poncho. He's super awesome and super cool. So I've been super privileged that I've gotten to participate in so many sports for pretty much the majority of my life. And I think a couple of years ago was the first time, around like my freshman year, or right around this time 3 years ago, I started thinking about all of the positive ways sport has really benefited my life. And when I thought about all of the adversity I've faced in my life, sport was that one link that I was always got me through whatever I was going through. So as I started thinking more about that and kind of taking other classes in my social thought and political economy major, as well as sport management with courses like sociology of sport, I started realizing that sport for social change and sport for development are real key areas of the sport industry that I felt like I could really contribute to. So as I was had all these thoughts in my mind, I started asking myself some questions, kind of like what gaps exist in resources for youth. I'm definitely a youth-centered person when I think about my own experiences. They all happened in my childhood as far as when that sport participation first got introduced to me. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. So kind of was asking myself what gaps exist, who could benefit from sport, maybe who was being overlooked, who was not having access to those sport opportunities. And then kind of the most important question of what did sport give me that people who couldn't play sports not get. I know Nichols College has a whole bunch of athletes in the sport management program. So anybody who has ever played a single sport on this call, I'm sure we could have like hours long conversation about the ways that sport has positively impacted your life. And I don't think that's any secret. It's just making sure that people who don't usually get to have access to that get to have access to that. So as I was doing more research, thinking about what would be the best population for me to serve and for me to take on, I settled on girls in the juvenile justice system, and just specifically because they are some of the most overlooked and underserved population of girls as far as programming for sports, as well as there's such a disproportionate number of abuse survivors within the juvenile justice system. So this is a very niche target population of girls who have been the victims of any kind of family violence, who have a lot of times that violence, which we'll get into more, kind of leads directly or has some kind of correlation with them ending up in the system. Once they're in the system, they're kind of in a situation where they're not able to really heal from that violence, and it can really contribute negatively to their development, moving them away from that rehabilitation. So kind of landed on this population. These are just some quick statistics that I think are super interesting. So 84% of girls in juvenile detention have experienced family violence, which I think is absolutely astronomical. And it seems like, I don't know how often that's addressed in the justice system. 31% of girls in detention have reported experienced sexual abuse prior to being detained, and then about 10% of detained youth report that sexual abuse while in detention, and that's either by a professional who works at the detention center, like a correctional officer, or a counselor, or it could be other youth within that detention center. So a lot of violence really tied into the justice system, which is not a secret, because in the general United States justice system, it's a pretty violent place by nature, but especially looking at the histories of the girls and people who are in the justice system, there's not so many resources for those people to move on from that trauma and heal from that trauma, so they can go on and move into a brighter direction, and to really like correct where they need to correct and address that pain that might have caused them to make a mistake or make a wrong decision. So thinking about those numbers, also think a little bit about how the juvenile justice system and childhood sexual abuse or any kind of family violence really interact with each other, which is a huge thing for me in why this program is so important and why more programming should exist for girls in the justice system. And when we look at the juvenile justice system, it's pretty traumatic and violent, like I said, in and of itself. The incidents of seclusion and restraint, and then that lack of programming, when they come together, that's not very supportive to a girl or any youth that has experienced negative, adverse childhood experiences. There is programming in justice in juvenile detention centers. There is. A lot of it is academic focused. Not so much of it is kind of moving around, getting your body active and kind of shifting things towards your own positive self-esteem building through sport and that kind of sport participation, just for clarification. And then the other side of it, before these girls are even in the system or even once they're there, kind of that background, that disproportionately high background of childhood sexual abuse, can lead to those relationship problems, whether it's with other peers, with romantic partners, with adults, authority figures, anything like that. It can lead to a lot of self-blame of these youth, where they're blaming themselves for things, which has an incredibly negative effect on mental health. And then it definitely decreases self-confidence, all of those incidences. So this is all factually based and research based. So at these intersections, when these two things come together, it really exacerbates the mental health and the success rates declining of all of these youth. So you'll have an increased risk of suicide ideation, and then there's higher rates of recidivism or committing those same crimes or similar crimes over again, as well as higher rates of re-victimization, which is the concept of people who have been victims of violence. They become victims again once they're out of it, whether it's the social circles that they're in, or them being targeted because of their previous experiences, anything like that. So kind of coming together in this system, that this is why this stuck out to me as I was doing research, is because this kind of overlap really seemed like it needed to be addressed. As well as we go into girls in particular, their victimization often leads right into their incarceration. So when we think about the most key reasons, or the most common reasons why girls are in detention centers, that's going to be things like running away, truancy, which is like not being absent to school, and then there's drug use as well. And all of those things can be very closely linked to sexual abuse, especially with running away, which is one of the most common ones. It's something like 93% of abuse happens within a household or by somebody that a girl closely knows to that family. So it would make sense if she's running away to be away from that abuse and away from that violent environment. And that's not a secret to anybody who works in the justice system. That's a very closely tied issue. As well as there are offenses like forced prostitution, which directly criminalize girls' victimization. So if a girl is trafficked or she's arrested for prostituting herself, if she's under the age of 18 and she's having sex with older men and she's in a situation where she's a prostitute, that is legally classified as a sexual assault or rape. So understanding that, the courts have interesting ways of navigating that depending on which state you're in, but many states will still send that girl to a juvenile detention center. It is situational, but in that situation, a girl is being criminalized for her being a victim of one of those incidences of assault, which I just think is super interesting. So this was a quote from the Center for Poverty and Equality, which really stood out to me in kind of my research, kind of backing all of these decisions to make this program. But the choice to punish instead of support sets in motion a cycle of abuse and imprisonment that has harmful consequences for victims of trauma, which I've kind of just outlined in all of those ways of how when girls enter this system coming from a traumatic background, when they're not given those tools to really succeed and heal from that trauma, it's no surprise when once they leave, they're still going to fall into that cycle of trauma. So just kind of outlining that there. So as far as a solution to those problems, as I'm thinking and kind of keeping sport in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about providing a trauma-informed care. And that's through the mentorship, community, and self-esteem building, because those were the main things coming from that kind of Venn diagram of the issues at the juvenile justice system and the issues of childhood violence, really when they come together. Those are the things that can really help that. As well as other ways to improve that would be kind of along this, I call it extending the social capital of affected youth. So allowing youth to be able to connect with other people, I think is a super important component of any type of healing, because nobody wants to feeling alone, and feeling alone is probably one of the worst feelings and most detrimental feelings that I can think of. At least that's my personal opinion, but I think it's pretty bad. So my at least ideas for building that social capital, for me, it starts with other survivors. So being able to connect girls with people who have been in that same environment and experience the same things. I think that's super important, as well as getting to connect with other youth in the juvenile justice system, just so they can connect with people who understand the same environment and have had a bit of the same like people around them within their life. Expanding their social capital to more healthy, maybe adult relationships, that maybe more neutral adult relationships as well. So that's mentors, coaches, or counselors. Able to build those relationships with stable relationships is really the key here, as far as people who will be able to guide them throughout healing development and will be there consistently for them. And then kind of moving to expand their social capital to youth outside the justice system. So youth who are in those positive activities and being in a different space that can shift them away from any kind of environment that it may have come from. Another piece of kind of this solution of providing this kind of trauma-informed care comes with looking at acknowledging the risk factors that youth face and supporting the protective factors. So the risk factors, and as this is defined by like youth.gov, so the United States like Department of Youth, basically, a risk factor is any aspect or any factor that can pose a risk or pose harm to a child. So they exist in 4 domains. There's individual, family, peer, and environment. And I won't read out and explain this whole chart, but I just want you guys to take a note at just the things that are bolded here. So looking in the family component, if there's maltreatment or abuse, or if there's exposure to family violence, and then looking into the environment of being in a school that fails to address social and emotional needs, those things so much tie into what we just spoke about as far as these youth experiencing some kind of harm or being at risk for harm. And when these things are not addressed, that's when youth are at the most risk for that suicide ideation and recidivism and revictimization. Shifting over to the protective factors, a protective factor is anything that will mitigate a risk factor. So trying to limit the impact that risk factor can make. And then again, looking at these bolded words, that comes into club affiliations, which for a lot of people is sport. And then those healthy and safe peer relationships, doing healthy and safe activities. Sport is another thing that falls into that category. And then just an overall community that promotes and fosters those healthy activities. So to me, when I look at those protective factors, that's a whole big circle of reasons why a sport program seemed like the proper way to offer these youth some kind of support. So that's why we get to sport, and that's how we got to Rising Phoenix in the first place. So a lot of my past year was just a culmination of research and looking into all of these facts and all of the things that youth face, especially in the justice system, and as well as how sport can be that positive driver of social change and make a positive social impact. When we think about sport, it's a platform for change and development, which as I've said, like if you participate in sport, you probably have felt this at least subconsciously in one way or another. So 3 key elements of building that self-esteem, which is absolutely huge, especially within girls, helping them build their positive feelings about their own body image and self-confidence, as well as just feeling motivated to get up and do things and achieve things for their own self. Then moving into kind of the mental health side, tons of research about how sport participation decreases stress, anxiety, and depression, and helps to increase kind of that feeling of self-worth and sense of feeling able to feel capable of something, which is such an important thing. This is a side note, but it's such like I feel like people really underestimate the power of being able to say that you worked hard to learn, for example, how to shoot a free throw. If you came in and you did not know how to shoot a free throw one day and you worked at it for 20 minutes and you knew how to shoot it, and you would feel a little bit better at yourself because you would say, wow, I can actually do something and I got this. And I'm not completely terrible at everything in my life because now I can shoot free throws. That's a very general example, but something along those lines as far as feeling more capable can have an immense positive impact on that mental health. And then as well as social support. So on a peer-based level, social support to just have those healthy relationships and have people building up and growing with you. In my personal opinion, I think people are like the best part about life, and you're getting to connect with them. That's what makes us all human. And we're really social creatures. Aside from that, having the coaches or the mentors who have the authority of being an adult who to a child, that's somebody who they'll be able to like say to a child, like, you have to go do this, or we're going to do this drill, or maybe they'll have some authority so that they're more trusted. But at the same time, because they're at a coach relationship and not like a correctional officer, or even like a teacher, there's more of an even ground, because at the end of the day, if you're playing sports together, you're really just playing together. So it's a little bit more of a relaxed relationship that can really lead to a lot more change and growth. So as far as my own program, there's kind of 3 key elements that I'm implementing slowly day by day. The program launched officially on February 11th, so about a month ago, maybe not even a month ago. And we kind of started on this track of first getting into this awareness phase. So this awareness for me just involves introducing this issue, which I think is not very spoken about or known about, just introducing that issue to the public and just keeping people informed, trying to post content and get it out into the world, just so it can be on people's radar as far as what issues exist, as well as how sport can be a positive impact on these issues, as well as why sport would be one of the better decisions in order to make that positive impact. What I'm working on currently, and what most of my like spring semester has been, and what most of what I'm sure my summer will be, is settling on what the most effective kind of tangible programming will be. So, and that's kind of this implementation phase. So introducing an engaging program to youth, seeing them face to face, being able to give them that sport participation that I think can be so beneficial. Still navigating a few options for what might be the absolute best choice, but we'll hopefully be settling on something soon, and we'll be able to implement that, whether it's after COVID settles down or maybe even before, but that'll probably vary depending on where we are. And then just even the last part of our programming is just kind of this ongoing sustained support. So one of my biggest fears with any kind of thing that I do personally, but especially with this program, is I get very nervous about being stagnant. And I think a lot of programs that work with youth, especially with at-risk youth, there is a tendency, or there is oftentimes the inability to keep track and keep those relationships strong after a child like grows up, like moves on, becomes an adult. And I just want to make sure that whatever program is being built out, it's one that those relationships can really stay. It can teach those youth to like keep in touch with their network, keep in touch with their people who have helped them and they've played with, because it's so fun to be able to keep in touch with those types of people. So just being able to sustain that support and be there for people, even if they've moved on from the program completely. As far as where we sit right now, this is our Instagram handle. Feel free to follow us, Rising Phoenix Program. Right now we exist as an Instagram page, and over the next couple of weeks, we'll launch a Twitter as well. Just trying to build up content, get it out into the world, try to make a positive impact through this kind of social media platform, and then eventually looking to get into that tangible programming once all the right conversations are had and the most effective program can kind of be figured out. I know that like I'm at the very beginning of an awesome journey that I hope will last like the rest of my lifetime and maybe even beyond my own lifetime, which is like the ultimate dream. But as far as thinking about the future, there's pretty much, this program could go in any kind of direction so long as it's a positive direction. So that's all for me as far as this. I'm going to, well, you guys can just like look at this. You can feel free to follow me or follow the program on Instagram, and then just connect with me on LinkedIn if you would like to. It's just my name, Alannah Scardino, which will also pop up in my Zoom. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll just put that in the chat because I would rather look at your faces than look at that one slide. But that's pretty much it for me. I would love to know if anybody has any questions. I would love to hear anybody's thoughts if you guys just have comments, but I'll shut up because I just spoke for like 25 minutes straight.
Alannah, I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
What ages are the girls that you're targeting?
So girls in the justice system, typically legally, they are around from age 12 up until the age of 21 is the oldest that most detention centers will have. The average age for girls in the justice system is about 16. So that would probably be, if I were to base a curriculum on that specific age, would probably be around there. But it's the range is probably just that teenage age range, which is a bit of a challenge because there's a huge difference between a 12-year-old and a 21-year-old. But it's hopefully just through that kind of same programming. It's like biologically and like mentally, those people would be in different places. But it's kind of a wider age range just to accommodate anybody that's in the justice system.
And how would you reach those girls? Like, what are the steps for you so then the justice system get connected with your organization?
Yeah, good question. So that's what I'm working on now. It's a huge networking piece and it's a huge relationship building piece with different organizations. And that's relationship building with either it's going to be individual detention centers or it's going to be state programs, but it can also be schools. It can be alternative schools. And it can be like even like police departments. So like when youth first, like if they were to get like a 16-year-old girl got arrested, there's even the possibility of like if that police officer or if that intake facility was called any program, which exists in other programs, calling up like Rising Phoenix to say like, oh, we just got this girl in and you're welcome to come introduce yourself to her. Just making that introduction so that whether the program exists on the inside of a detention center or if it's one that's more on the outside after girls have already been in those detention centers or if they're in alternate kind of housing, then they can kind of have that at least a start of an established relationship. But good question. There's a lot of ways it can be gone about. It boils down to just networking and that relationship building with those institutions that already have access to those girls and are the natural like flow to where those girls would be.
How originally, like how now you're starting, what is the type of, are you doing or planning to do any type of fundraising? What type of, I guess I'm trying to say, where is the money going to come from?
Yeah, good question. So I've been hesitant to start and reach out on my grant writing as of right now because I have gotten offers for like different scholarships and like different grants. People have said like, why don't I like write this grant for you or do all this kind of stuff? And I've said like, that sounds awesome, but I also don't know what I'm going to spend that money on right now because a lot of my program right now and a lot of the project right now is built on kind of just this awareness piece and this education piece. And until I really know what is going to be the best means of incorporating that tangible change, whether because there's so many forms of it in my mind, I'm hesitant to just commit to taking some money just to take money. But it's hopefully through a collective efforts of kind of that grant writing, which is such a crucial skill to build up and develop, as well as looking into these different scholarship programs, which exist for which exist from other organizations like across like the United States. There's a lot of foundations that are specifically existing to fund these types of like sport for development programs, which is super awesome. And I'm fortunate. Those are super competitive grants, so it's definitely takes a lot of work. But then hoping once I get to that point, having a more understanding of what funds are needed and where can have more direction on what will be the best way to fundraise, whether that's reaching out and holding like events or benefits, or if it's the cold calling, or if it's the partnering with other organizations or corporate organizations just to kind of uplift and support the program. Really good question. We're not at that place yet, but we will be sometime soon.
So Alannah, I ask one more question, then I let the students ask more questions, but how can we at Nichols, the sport management program, and students in particular can help?
Really good question. I think the best thing to do right now, I think it's so awesome that y'all came to this and y'all are listening. That's super awesome because one of my biggest priorities right now is just getting this information out in the world and spreading it and sharing it. I would love if you all would follow the page and if you share the content. That's like one of my biggest goals right now is just getting it and sharing it into the world, as well as if anybody has any connections, anybody who works in the justice system, if anybody knows anybody who wants to like do anything working with building out this program. I always love collaborating with people on anything. And so if there's anything anybody wants to do as far as start to develop this program, it's very interesting because it's a very brand new program. It's very much a lot of research that is all compiled, and that research is kind of slowly trickling out via social media. But it's as we move along into thinking about the kind of the tangible programming piece, and then the fundraising piece that'll come after that is kind of ideated. That's probably when anybody who wants to volunteer some time, I would love to incorporate their help. You guys can find me on LinkedIn right there, or you can email me.
Thank you, Alannah.
Of course, I'll put my email there too.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What would you like to see the program in like 10 years from now?
Good question. So my very, very first piece of advice the very first person I ever told about wanting to start this program was my soccer coach. And it was like 3 years ago. I was just in the very like beginning stages of like, I kind of want to start a sport for development program. And I was just thinking out ideas, like just thinking out loud, just like brainstorming ideas with her. And she just told me, she was like, whatever, because I was doubting and I was thinking, I was like, I don't know what I want this program to be. I was like, I feel like it could just be a program like in my hometown of Rochester, or I don't know if it would be able to grow past that. And she was like, Alannah, just stop, because if you start to set limits on what this looks like, then that's just going to completely limit the growth, because you're not going to be aiming for maximum growth. You're going to be aiming for a specific target. So this is not really an answer for your question, because when I think about what Rising Phoenix could be, I think there's no limit to what it could be. There's potential for it to become a partnership with another organization. There's a potential for it to spread to like 15 different cities, and kind of help youth in those organizations. Or there's potential for it to kind of remain as this kind of education-based platform and programming. My ideal for seeing it 10 years from now is being able to be a sustainable and credible and reputable program, at least in 1 or 2 cities, even if it's my own hometown of Rochester, just being able to help youth in some way or another, and just being able to have those important community relationships that make the program worthwhile for both the kids and the institutions, like the justice system in general, whether it's like a housing program or a detention center. Make sure that it's beneficial for them because we're providing that programming, and just being able to help youth in any way and shape possible.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
How many people are like currently a part of your team, and like, how does one be a part of the team?
Good question. So also an interesting question, because it's when I say things like we are doing this and we're doing this and like we post these things, it's me and it's my program and it's my research that I put into it. But I really struggle with saying like it's not just me. I've had countless conversations with so many people who have helped me get a better knowledge and a better understanding of what to expect within the justice system, within sport for development, within working with at-risk youth and youth who have had traumatic experiences in their past. So all of their kind of like collective efforts and collective knowledge has really been the foundation of this program. So as far as like the official team of what Rising Phoenix is and who like is making these plans and making these decisions, that's me. As far as who is on the team, like the general team, and who's supporting this and who do I go to when I need ideas or help navigating a certain thing, that's like limitless amounts of people, from professors to alumni of UMass to just like super close friends that I have. It's like definitely a team effort to get this thing going. But if you want to be a part of the team, email me and we can find like whatever you want to do. We can find something. There's limitless opportunities and potential to do whatever. And at the very least, like can have a conversation about what might be beneficial for you if you're trying to like just contribute in any way or build up experience or do anything with social media, like whatever works for you. Like just shoot me an email and we could chat.
But
Question.
Mm-hmm.
So like you're talking about in the future, and like obviously you could expand, and like you don't know what the future holds. Have you thought about like going into like inner city schools and talking to girls before they get into like maybe like before they get into the system or anything like that? Because I know like when I went to a city school, and when I was in high school for 1 year. When I went to high school, I went to a city school for 1 year, and there were a lot of girls like trying to play football on the team and everything like that. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, so that's like a super close question to my heart because I'm from like an inner city school district too, like Rochester, New York. It's like, and it's not a very good one either. It's like out of 210 like public school districts in New York State, it's ranked like 201 or something. It's like it's pretty bad as far as like the things that kids go through within that district. So I always am thinking about like how could I incorporate this with just like schools and being able to establish a relationship with girls even who aren't in the justice system, because there's nothing to say that the reason why I chose girls in the justice system in particular is because there's such a disproportionate amount of violence that those girls have faced. And I was thinking, as a starting point, this makes a lot of sense to go this direction. I absolutely think that it's definitely necessary at some point and definitely feasible and definitely would be a right thing to expand and just go into more those schools and those other programs and alternative programs, even if it's like alternative high schools for at-risk youth. That definitely would make sense as a move to go offer support and offer programming for those youth as well, because I think it's everything is very closely linked. And being able to provide as much support to as many youth as possible is definitely on my radar. I think the justice system is hopefully just my starting point.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So do you have a plan or a general idea on how to keep these youth supported even when they leave the justice system?
Such a good question, because that's the challenge that I think most programs face, is being able to keep those youth supported. A few models exist as far as what makes the most sense. One is kind of a player to mentor model where girls, once they kind of, if they moved on and they're old enough and they're not like youth anymore, if they're like more that adult, being able to incorporate that back into the programming and saying like, okay, you've been a part of this program, now you're going to coach it, and now you can lead these girls and help other girls and kind of have that self-sufficient model of coaches and having girls. I think that would be a super strong model, and that is it can be super hard to sustain sometimes and to get started. But I think that's an awesome model just because those coaches who have already come through the program can really be a first person experience and mentor and connection point for those girls, which is not to say that just because two people have gone through similar things and have both been in the justice system that they'll be a perfect match for like mentor and mentee, or just like a perfect match for people, because that's not how people work. But I think it could be super valuable to have that kind of structure if that is something that a girl would want to do.
Alannah,
Yes.
as a professor, I know some of your professors like Janet Fink and Nefertiti and Nicole. I can see like all of their philosophies and like all the hard work that they put now reflected on you. So I think that you're making them very proud. And as a professor, it's so awesome to hear you saying, oh, I spent all this year researching and now I have this valuable product that is going to be changing society. I think it's admirable. I'm inspired by you. I really wish you the very best, not only your graduation, but with this organization. And in the future, in the fall and future semesters, I usually work with startups and nonprofits in my classes. And then if I would love to reach out to you and see how we can do a project with your organization.
Oh my
Good
gosh,
job
of
so
course.
far. It is amazing. You are amazing. And I really wish you the best in your career and with this nonprofit.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. That's very kind. Definitely, Dr. Fink and Neff and Nicole have like, those are my professors, people who don't know. I got to spat out names. They've been like such a help and have really kind of like led my like support and really have guided me so much. So I'm very thankful for them. You have my information. So of course would love to work on anything and work on any project. It's always appreciated, because anything to just keep the momentum going, that's all I'm looking to do, is just keep things going, keep things pushing, keep learning, trying to help everybody else learn. And that's the goal. So thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody for listening. I appreciate
thank you.
I appreciate all of you. This is the first time I've spoken about Razzie Phoenix with anybody who's not one of my professors. So this is really awesome and super cool. So thank you all for the opportunity to do it.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
Does anyone have any more questions or anything like that? No. Yeah. Well, again, yeah, we all really appreciate you coming. It was great. We gave a great, a lot of great information. I learned a lot of great stuff.
Awesome. Well, I'm taking a picture real quick because you're gonna all go on my story. But
Sounds good.
smile. Perfect. Okay, cool. Well, thank you all. I really appreciated that. This was super awesome. A super awesome way to like start off my week, get this Sunday going into productivity mode. Follow my program if you haven't followed already. But it was so nice meeting you all. Can I connect with me on LinkedIn, please? I would love to get to know some of you more. If y'all want to like just send me a LinkedIn message, we can set up a phone call or a Zoom or anything. Because y'all are awesome.
Thank you, Alannah.
Of course.
Keep the follow back.
Of course. Of course.
All right.